Jim, do you have that? Thank you, that's fun.
Had to take his pills.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mayor and City Council meeting on, what is it? It is March 12th, 2025. This is a special meeting regarding the Main Street Taneytown restructure. Thank you all for being here. If you'd please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands.
So again, thank you all for being here. One of the biggest things as we talk about this, we're going to go around the council, kind of talk about where we left off from last time, which is again what we want this vision to be for Main Street, where we want to go with it, what we want to see out of it from the city again, and what we want to see, how it can help the business owners, how it can help the residents, how it can really bring this up. Jim, did you have anything to add before I start opening up the council to start talking about some of these issues?
Not really. I think just maybe a quick recap from our last time. I think, what we managed to get through was reaffirm the city's commitment that we do want to remain a Main Street, Maryland community, which, if all goes well, will also mean we'll qualify as be certified as a national Main Street community. I think we recognize that the economic development position is expected to commit 35 hours a week to the Main Street role. As part of one of the requirements of the state program. So I think that's kind of what we achieved with the last meeting when we talked about it. So with that in mind, I guess we can pick up from there.
And as we go through this, I know Councilmember Tillman has produced some topics of discussion that he'd like to go through in regards to, and we'll go through that. Towards the end of this meeting, I'll give a chance for public comment, so everybody can kind of give their input as far as what we've talked about throughout the meeting, any recommendations that they have, any recommendations that the businesses have. So if you'd just mind, as we go through this, hold any comments, critiques, questions, just till we get to that period. Thank you, and Councilmember Tillman, I know you're the one, you produced some of these topics.
Sure. Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for being here this evening, and thank council for really being involved in wanting to move this effort forward. I think it's very important for the city, and I think that you all obviously believe that it is, or we wouldn't have gotten this far. So, one of the, before we move on to those, there were a series of recommendations that were made back in October from staff. Before we really can move on and try to process those recommendations, I think the last piece that we really need to go through is to answer a couple of basic but important questions. The first of these is what is the mission of Main Street Taneytown? We know what the mission of Main Street in general is in terms of revitalization, historic preservation, growth of a business and residential community that is walkable and brings back that small town feeling that, as you go through the results of the comprehensive plan survey, so many people in town seem to want. So, what is the mission of Main Street Taneytown? My first run at these things is revitalize the historic district by bringing in new business while maintaining the historic nature of the neighborhood, making the downtown friendlier and more welcoming in appearance, recruiting businesses that provide goods and services that are of use to city residents as well as to the tourist and the commuter customer. Provide welcoming experiences to entice shoppers and diners to come to downtown Taneytown and spend their time and money. Providing access to grants, loans, and other funding to Main Street businesses and property owners that may not otherwise be available or known about. And to use the leverage of city government to provide the necessary resources to do these things. So, kind of picking these points off right off of the top, you know, one of the things that struck me, and I've mentioned this a number of times, is that very little has changed in the 8 years since I first came to Taneytown. Almost, you know, a little bit of musical chairs in some of the storefronts, but other than that, nothing looks different. And not changing anything isn't necessarily preserving the historic nature of the town. You know, there's preservation to be done, and there are buildings that, you know, right across the street is the prime example that need some work to be saved. There are facades that, you know, could stand updating, upgrading, improving, cleaning. So I'd like to turn it back over to you all. What do you know? What do you see in terms of revitalizing the historic downtown? What is it you all want to see?
I know the topic is revitalize, you know, downtown. You know, one of the biggest things I think we have to acknowledge is the residents that live downtown. I think when you're talking about revitalizing, I think one of the biggest things you need to address is the livability of downtown. You know, we have people that walk to Food Line to get basic necessities. We have people that walk all the way down to the Sunoco Exxon just to get some drinks. There also has to be businesses that help those residents in this area. Again, I think part of revitalizing and again part of maintaining that historic nature is also realizing that those individuals who live on this street are part of that mission. And I think we know that here at council, and I just think it's something we have to make sure we acknowledge going forward. It isn't just about the businesses; it's also about the residents who live along this route.
Gentrification is one of those huge issues that plays out in a lot of these small urban settings. You know, what do you, if you improve it too much, what happens to the people who have been here forever? You know, and that's a very delicate balancing act. And there's nothing that says that the businesses that come in can't be businesses that serve the local residents as well as you know, the commuter traffic or the you know, or the whatever the tourist traffic, especially to the tourist traffic going to the weddings. You know, it's kind of where the marketplace lies. So yeah, this shouldn't be done to the exclusion of people who live here. I don't think you're not serving a purpose to do that. But by the same token, you don't have to lose your historic significance of buildings just to be able to provide modern amenities.
Greatest assets we have is the historic character of our downtown. That needs to be maintained, I think, at all costs. But that's kind of like a backdrop to what we're trying to do. I think the desire to get more people, more storefronts here and open storefronts that are functional most of the days during the week, and be able to serve all clientele, just like you say. I see little distinction between the people coming in on the weekends for the weddings and people who live here full time. You know, attract people downtown, you have to have some reason for them to come downtown. So I think one of the first things has to be done is we have to kind of identify the types of businesses that are appropriate for the downtown area. The interesting, you know, when I gave my little speech on Gordonsville back in November, or December maybe, was. I can't remember when, but anyway, back then somewhere. It was obvious that the businesses downtown were, I mean, they were functional businesses. There was a LP gas dealer there. I mean, you know, that's certainly not a tourist type business. There was the post office was located on the main street. That not a touristy type business either. But the downtown had an aura or I don't know. I guess it would be a look. Maybe I don't know how to describe it. That encouraged people to shop and to spend some time there. It was attractive. It was well maintained, and it was really something for everyone. There were a lot of good ideas that time I was there that I was able to take note of. The idea of having some of the upper floor apartments serve as B&B locations or things of that nature struck me as a pretty good idea. It's kind of away from our normal thought of just having state housing upstairs. So it goes beyond that. I think it requires a lot of thought outside the box. The key to all of this, of course, is going to be the person that we hire to oversee this economic development, whether it be in Main Street or anywhere else in town, for that matter. But I think the individual will have to be a team builder and a salesperson. He's going to have to be a person that can get along with not only the merchants and other business people in town, but also be a promoter. You'll have to, or she, I keep saying he, will have to have a real drive about them to identify what type of businesses we want downtown, and then go out and get them physically. And it's not as simple as putting an ad in a newspaper or a magazine saying we need dry cleaners downtown. We need to go out to an existing dry cleaning operation and say, we want you to come to Taneytown. We've got this to make it worth your while. And that's where the city council comes in. We're going to have to look at our function in this whole thing. We're going to have to decide, well, what don't we like about the downtown right now, and what do we want to have happen in the future, and then structure our framework in order to accommodate that. The key element key takeaway I got from Gordonsville after talking to my son-in-law was that there were the primary businesses downtown were all together in wanting to see this happen, and they were in agreement in developing the downtown as they did, and working together as a business community, working together in conjunction with the municipality, has spelled success for them. And I think we need to kind of emulate that type of idea. We can't dictate what downtown is going to be, but we can kind of like a comprehensive plan, I guess, in more detail. We stop and we say, what would we like to see in downtown? You know, we did a study years ago. We hired a company, spent a lot of money to do it, that kind of told us how to structure our downtown, which was a brilliant idea, and I still to this day think it would work. It just takes somebody to promote it and recruit the business people to buy into it. And that's the whole, that's the big job. We need to, again, I go back to what I said in the very first sentence. We need to create a downtown that'll cause people to want to come downtown. There's no need to come downtown if it's to, maybe, then there's no reason. I mean, we stop and we think about what is the complexion of our town? What does it become? Sure, we have a lot of historic area in town. We have a lot of longtime residents, and we also have a lot of new development where folks run back and forth to Washington or Baltimore or Harrisburg or wherever they're going to work and come back in the evening and never come downtown at all. And so what's to bring somebody that lives in Meads Crossing or Meadowbrook or one of the new developments that's coming? What's to encourage them to come down? That's where I think we need to start. Let's define number one, the spaces that we have available, or the spaces we could have available. And the spaces we could have available, we then need to approach the landlords and say, hey, look, I know this is as structured as an apartments right now, but we're willing to provide incentives for you to dedicate this to commercial space. And, it's going to take some creative thinking, and it's going to take some thinking that is outside the box to get to that point. But I think it's an essential thing to do if we want an attractive, active downtown. Back in the day when 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 80 years ago, people would come on Friday nights that put the mule in the shed and come to downtown. That's what they do. But that's not what we're trying to get at today. We can't go back to that turn of the century mentality and expect to be successful. But we got to look at the successful downtowns all around us and see what they did and how they did it, and what can we do similar to encourage it. So it's I'm not being very specific, but I don't think that I can be very specific.
I don't think we're looking for real specific
I've
right
got
now.
my
'cause
ideas of what I'd
We're
like
still
to
way
do.
early for that.
Yeah. But I think the idea is just to simply come up with an idea of, first of all, to take an inventory of the downtown and find out what we have available.
I
or
think
what
we're
we
actually
could have
working on that, had discussion with the city manager. Jim, you want to expand on that?
So just a couple of things I'd like to pull out from your comments there. You mentioned Gordonsville, and you and I have talked about Gordonsville a little bit. I'd been there several years ago, and actually just returned there a couple weeks ago, and in talking with the gentleman who was hosting at the visitor center the day I stopped by, just to affirm something you said, they had a community-driven effort. They had some like-minded business owners and residents that wanted to see the change, and they drove that change. So very much a community effort, in Gordonsville. And both Councilman Tillman and Mayor Pro Tem McCarron mentioned the idea of, what do we want to be? What do we want to cater to? Do we want to cater to? And, that sort of touches on the Main Street program's idea of having a transformative strategy that, what's going to be your catalyst? What do you want to look like? What do you want to focus on to make the change? And what is that change? And I don't know if that's and I'll throw it out for discussion, is that more something for a future Main Street board to determine rather than the council? Should we set up the guardrails and let a Main Street board figure out that transformative strategy rather than, the elected officials do it. I mean, you obviously represent the residents of the city. They put you here. So, certainly I know you're in touch with the community as well. But I think that's something that we need to think about is, whose role is it to determine that transformative strategy for the Main Street program?
Joint role. It obviously will require input from the business community. But it also falls upon us, it's incumbent to us to try to provide vision, I guess, as to what it could be. And I think that all of us working together, just like you mentioned a minute ago, will yield success. But we might have fits and starts, but I think we'll eventually get there. I mean, I think that the more we talk, the more we can agree, the more we can accomplish.
And I think that, what this all comes back around to, and what the question, the primary question was, what's the mission, of Main Street Taneytown? And it gets back to where we were setting kind of a vision for what we would like to see. And like Jim mentioned, the idea of exactly how you get there and what that roadmap looks like, that's kind of more of the board's prerogative. It's kind of for council as a whole to set a vision, and maybe some goals. I think that's walk before we run. But to set that vision out there, what we want to see, and for whoever the Main Street manager, economic development person is, understands that that's what the goal is, and is there to help the board get to that place.
I think one of the biggest things you really have to strive for if you're going to make it work is a uniformity of hours, a uniformity of days. You can't walk from one end of the Main Street to the other and pass one open business. I'd say that's the biggest driver of why you are not seeing traffic on Main Street.
Well, there's chicken and egg there, because are the businesses not open because there's nobody there, or is there nobody there because the businesses aren't open? And so,
Well, like the Mayor Pro Tem said, the next thing is you got to make that attraction for them to come to the businesses. And I know hours that you can have a business and you can have people in it. I know that very well. And the question is how do you get them from point A of Main Street to point B of Main Street, and make sure that there's stuff open in between those 2 points, where if they want to shop more, they can. Because right now what's happening is at different times of the day, different times of the week, and different times of the week, people are just coming for a singular business because there's nothing else open at that time. During the day we got Stonehouse open, people go there. But where else are they going to go after Stonehouse on an average weekday? Next question is a lot of places close at 5 p.m. Well, you have to remember a lot of our residents, especially in the newer developments, are bedroom communities. They're getting home at 5, 6 p.m. If your businesses are closed up before that time when they're getting home, you're not going to see that shopping during the week. Again, I know a couple businesses go to the strategy of being open on the weekend. And that's an area where you could even start to kind of get some uniformity on those hours, so people can go from point A to point B.
yep.
I think the hour thing will take care of itself if we get the right businesses. If there's a demand for whatever anybody is selling, people will participate. They'll and I'm not so hung up about the hours as I am about the types of businesses that are being offered. Something that's attractive. I mean, here, 43-year resident of the downtown. I mean, I could recite in my sleep what I'd like to see downtown business-wise, because it's anytime you have to do anything, you've got to go somewhere else to do it, and that's sad. We shouldn't have to do that. Our population is to the point where it can support businesses if they're the right businesses.
And again, when you say the right business, I agree there, but I think a lot of people, and this is to be blunt, a lot of people don't think of what that means. A lot of people think, I want this, so it's bound to work. But you have to remember your demographic of the area, you have to remember the demographic of your residents, of your new communities, of your old communities. You have to find something that actually resonates with all of those people, or else you won't strive, you won't be able to.
Right, and with that, the demographics, couldn't get the word out, of, you know, the folks that come here for, you know, for the wedding traffics, the folks that come here to spend the weekend either at Antrim or at our place. And then, you know, also the demographic of the people that drive through, and how can we capture some of those 15,000 cars a day that go up and down this street? And, you know, so it is a mix, and it will take a mix, and I think but the details of that, I think, is for the board to work out. I think what we're trying to get to in this conversation this evening is that this is what we want the Main Street to be doing, working in that direction. And that was, I think we seem to come to that, come pretty much to agreement on that. So, you know, one of the other, just kind of to move forward a little bit on the points here, you know, one of the other things that we are looking for the Main Street Board to do is to provide access to loans, grants, funding, that otherwise might not be available. And these are things that can come through the state programs and the national programs. And so, and that's kind of where we talk about the job of the Main Street Manager and Economic Development Coordinator. That's where that person really comes in, because that's what that person's job, a large measure of that person's job, I think, is.
My only thing would be, you know, we don't want to make the Main Street Committee into another chamber of commerce. That's what kind of my worry, as far as, you know, there is some specifics to the Main Street businesses for the grants and whatnot. But again, a lot of this, you know, when you're talking about the other loans and other funding sources available, this is something really, I believe, a chamber of commerce should be promoting.
Well, there's a lot of the stuff that's available strictly through the Main Street program, and that's, you know, but there are other avenues, and whether you know, whether it's a Chamber of Commerce or whether it's the Main Street Manager, I don't know that it matters, as long as we're getting that information to those businesses who can use it.
But don't get me wrong. You know, if that, my problem here is if the idea is that the Main Street Board is somehow going to make viable businesses, that's not what a Main Street Board can do, in my opinion. I really don't want to make basically what is essentially a Chamber of Commerce. There's some grants, there's some loans for Main Street businesses, but I think people overestimate what those actually are and the amounts of those monies. I would say don't set the expectation so high that people expect that this committee make the businesses viable.
I look at grants as something that's nice if they're available, but you really can't build a program around the fact that you might get grants or not get grants. You've got to be able to, if you're going to make a decision to relocate your business anywhere, you've got to say, well, I've got the demographics to support it, and what I'm selling people are going to want, and they're going to come into my store. And that's the final criteria. And if there's a grant available to put up an awning or do a facade or paint the building or whatever it happens to be, then all the better.
It's a nice little balance.
But you can't really count on that.
And that's
You know, we say that, we again, I mentioned this to you the other day. I think the individual that assumes this EDC role is got to be 85% salesman and 15% manager. I think he needs to be a salesman from the standpoint that he needs to be able to relate to the existing businesses in town and convince them that he is working on their behalf to help them succeed. And on the same token, he needs to be out among the other communities in our area, maybe not in our area, maybe anywhere, recruiting businesses to come to Taneytown. Just simply waiting for them to knock on our door and say, hey, how about if you all allow businesses in this town? We've got to be out there knocking on their door and saying, hey, I like your business, how about coming to Taneytown? And I think that's the biggest challenge in finding a person to head this up. If that person is the right person, he'll be able to accommodate what we've just been talking about. He'll be able to bring the community together, and I'm speaking of the business community and the government community, and we'll be able to develop a direction that we can go in and work toward it. And it's got to be structured with measurable goals. Be able to sit down with this guy and say, "This is what I expect you to do," and how do you plan on doing that? Let it give. I'm not talking about micromanaging the guy or the lady, but you've got to be able to say, this is what we want for our main main downtown area. Can you provide that? Do you think you can help that?
The other thing that a lot of these programs are about planting seeds. Some of this is seed money, because maybe somebody has a good idea for a business but doesn't have the capital to get it started. Those are more that kind of help is more of what I'm talking about. We shouldn't be. You're right. We shouldn't be in the business of making sure that other that businesses succeed, but we should be in the business of helping them get a start. And whether that's a revolving loan fund or whether there's some kind of redevelopment of an individual building or a set of buildings, when you look at some of the things that have been accomplished in some of the other main streets, working with redevelopment. I know, for example, in Leonardtown, they actually added second stories to a number of buildings. They actually worked with a developer to get buildings, to buy up buildings and to add second stories, to add office spaces or other things that they thought that they needed there. Now, of course, Leonardtown is a little bit different because that's a county seat, so there's a reason for there to be a little bit more office stuff than we would have here, but there still are, there's still needs for some office space. I'm not saying we need to go adding stories to buildings around here, but that's just throwing that out as something that can be done as part of what a Main Street group can do.
Well, again, you got to have everybody playing on the same page. To have one segment of the stakeholder community going one way and another segment of the stakeholder community going another way is non-productive, and it's up to us to kind of bring all that together. I'm thinking about, we've all my years on the council, one of the things that I've tried over and over again to promote was some kind of standard as far as rental housing goes. And I've never been successful to do that. I'm sorry that I've not been able to do that, but I understand that property rights are property rights. But if we can, I'm not, and coercion is not the way to do it, but getting landlords to buy into the idea or look at new ways of making their properties in downtown more profitable. And it's those kind of things where we can couple the downtown development, the idea of a townhouse development back there behind by the Creamery building on that back street that we came up with years ago during this development plan. What a great idea that would be for senior housing. How that people that could walk into the downtown and shop. That would be a super idea if but it's all these need to be come together and say, well, yeah, we got this piece, and this piece. I don't think that piece will work, but this piece will work. And we put all that together and have the unity behind it from all the stakeholders, and it'll get accomplished. But just everybody having their own ideas and taking the attitude, well, nobody wants to listen to me, so I'll just keep it to myself. We've got to let people know that their input's important, and we need to find a way that we can accommodate the best ideas to move everything forward. Not every idea will work.
I did want to bring up something in relation to the fund of the next Main Street Advisory Board. Was me considering tying it to a percentage of the town's revenue. That way, when we have an increasing tax base, the money that goes to the Main Street Committee also increases. That way, it isn't just a set amount, but it's based on our actual revenue and budget. That's something that council would consider, but it's something that would allow it to grow as the town kind of grows, as far as what we're contributing to the program. And again, it kind of
I think that that's a discussion that once we get into those points, talking about the things that are in Jay Meese's report, I think that when we get to that level of detail, which is hopefully where we're going to go with
We have to be
one more.
creative with
Yeah.
programs like that. You're right.
And right, and that's kind of the whole, it kind of sneaks into the second question, about the breadth and scope of the Main Street activities and the Main Street Taneytown's role. At how far into that, does the Main Street Board get?
I think it starts with the mission, because if a mission's not funded, you can't do a mission.
And
I think what the serious consideration needs to be, what are we willing to spend of the taxpayers' money on this program? And honestly, that's one of the first conversations you should be having, because you can't have any of this other stuff. You can't even be considering some of this other stuff unless you know how much you have available to spend, what your vision can even be based on your limitations of a budget for that program. And again, I think council seriously needs to consider what they want to spend on that program before we can really talk about some of this, because again, you can come up with a grand vision, but if you don't have the budgetary or revenue.
Right,
if you
and
don't
again,
have
I think
behind
that's
it.
that's part of addressing the 21 points of the staff report that was done back in October or December.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
Regarding the funding, the state envisions, they suggest a third model of, a third of the program's budget coming from the local government, a third coming from fundraising activities, and a third coming from grant receipts.
But I think you have to be
And-
realistic if you're going to start this
Well,
program up.
Right, for start, right, but I think that ultimately that, if you target, maintaining those ratios, as the program becomes more successful, they can come back to the city saying, well, your third needs to increase because, look, we've gotten these grants, we've gotten, done these fundraising efforts, so you need to kick in more, to maintain your share as well. So it kind of incentivizes the program to do more so they get more also. And maybe that's a little longer term sort of thing, but, rather than tying it to
I could see it a
the
longer
city's,
term when you're going to separate them from the city itself. But again, I think there has to be a monetary commitment that is either a percentage or, again, council really
Yeah, it needs to be stable.
be a stable
Yes.
amount that they can
And-
plan a budget.
I think, yeah, I mean, setting an amount, but I don't think like tying it to, a percentage of the budget, because the city's needs are going to, go up and down based on, capital projects we need to do, based on, other projects that we need to do. So, we may have a year that we generate more income tax revenue that may need to go more towards a street repavement or something like that, that might take priority over, a fixed percentage, going to the Main Street program.
I think that level of commitment that we are going to commit those funds, I think that's a driving force that we are making a commitment to this program. Again, the idea that, hey, we might need a road in the future, so we're going to take away your funding. I mean, how does a committee plan for that in the future? Given that commitment of a percentage of the budget, in my opinion, lets them know they are going to have a stable budget. They can kind of anticipate what they're going to have for this year, the next year. And again, I think it shows the city's commitment to making sure this program is ongoing. And again, I believe one of the first steps is setting that budget so you can know what your mission is going to be, what your vision. And spout all kinds of crazy visions that it's, we're going to do all kinds of crazy stuff, 2-story, whatever.
Well,
but
right.
you can't, none of that's realizable without the money behind the fund, or the money behind the projects.
I suppose the point I'm trying to make is we don't by policy commit, certain percentages of the budget to even essential services. So I'm just hesitant to, to lock something like that in. I'm not opposed to the, I guess philosophically the idea of like there being some connection, if we're having a good year, Main Street has a good year too because they get a bigger donation. But I think that rather than that being a fixed policy, I think it really needs to be something that's looked at each year with our budget, depending on the other needs and projections, each year. But ultimately, it's you guys.
And while, I normally agree with that for good budgeting, and, forever a point to where again, even a small percentage of 0.5 would be a substantial increase to the Main Street budget. But if we're ever to the point where we need to bring that down because we have so many other issues going on, I mean, there's going to be other cuts.
Yeah, I mean,
happening.
I don't ever see, at least at this point in time, I can't imagine that the Main Street program, that the city's portion of the Main Street program would exceed 6 figures. I mean,
No,
maybe it will.
You'd have to put it up to 1 to 2%.
Yeah, right. I mean, maybe it will, or maybe we get involved in something grandiose, like buying up a half a block of properties, but I don't see that happening. And so I don't think we're talking about enough money to worry about in that regard.
And
The
if
biggest
we're
part is the
talking about
stability.
operating less capital, maybe there's more conversation to be had on that. Because the capital is a big number driver.
Yes.
That really makes our budget jump up and down, each year based on the projects we're doing. So I think we need to isolate the capital, out of
Right,
that,
yeah,
out of that
yes,
picture.
operating the
Well, yeah, yes.
overall.
Out of the capital projects, yes.
Right, we wouldn't
capital
include that
and-
in any, right.
And then you'd be inflating it.
And well, I mean, if
Astronomically.
it was linked, it'd be, up one year, down the next, and so on, and less predictable, I think.
No, I think we've talked about this, and again.
A little bit, yeah.
You know my theory on it, which is that you don't include the capital projects on that, because, again, we have capital projects that are in the millions. I mean, again, that level of stability that it would provide to the committee and that commitment, I think is one of the first starting points you have to have. We have to be realistic in what the vision is, or we're going to set expectations that are just too high. And I think that's what happens a lot of the time, is we set expectations that are not realizable, that are not possible. It needs to be grounded. It needs to be something that can be done. So when you're meeting those expectations, you're getting that boost that you have made a goal, that you've done it.
Besides, I think any sort of big project thing, I think would be a whole separate type of grant and kind of an activity unto itself, as opposed to being part of the operating budget of the program.
But again, that's just my theory as far as how it should be budgeted, or at least committed. That way, as the town has a good year, town is bringing in money, Main Street has a good year as well. And again, that gives that commitment that they can kind of plan around as far as what their budgets are looking like. But that's just my theory. I think that's one of the first things you have to address is what are you working with when you're looking at all.
I think, and then when we start really getting into the nuts and bolts, I believe you're correct. I'm not.
The problem is that we got to start getting into the nuts and
Yeah,
bolts. We will
I
be.
think we're heading that.
We will be
Well,
here for a
and
couple
I'm
of
trying to
months.
get everything, like, as we go through this process, we're trying to carry everybody along here and say, all right, make sure we're on the rails that we all want the program to be on. I think, part of the reason that this kind of went south is because we set up a system that was kind of doomed to failure from the beginning and really didn't encompass a lot of the true tenets of what the Main Street program was about. So that's why to me, that's why we're going through a lot of this exercise right now. Going to a fresh start, let's make sure that everybody understands the direction that we're going in. So, moving on to talk about the breadth and scope of what Main Street Taneytown would hope to do and accomplish. I think the first thing we need to do is have a plan. And there have been a few efforts that Mayor Pro Tem McCarron was talking about. I know there was a report done in 2003. I know that there was, I think there was another report done in the mid-2010s. But they didn't seem to have gone anywhere. So what we want to make sure that that a new Main Street says, hey, let's look at these plans. What can we salvage and use out of what we've already spent money to get? And how do we create and craft a plan to go forward? The other thing that we want to think about in terms of the breadth and scope of Main Street's activities, will we give the Main Street Board the authority to lease a storefront space to create an incubator? Where we can get some of these local craftspeople and business people in and say, okay, here's a space, we'll help you run this, we'll provide you with this space, we expect this amount of return from what you're doing, and if it works, it's great, and maybe we can get them into a better storefront down the line, and if it doesn't work, well, let's bring the next one in. Or let's have a mix of things and see what sells and works, in some of the other main streets, like I said, they actually are getting, grants in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy buildings, and then get proposals from developers to redevelop those into usable commercial spaces. I don't know that we need to go that far, but maybe we do. But I want to make sure that we know that the board knows that they have the authority to go ahead and do those things if that makes sense to do. And of course, obviously, they would have to come back.
I don't think anything should be off the table. We've got to use judgment and prudence and guidance. But, any idea that'll work, any idea that'll be successful is worth trying. Like advertising, I've always looked at advertising, and some people look at it as an expense, but if it works, it's free. And the same way with what we have to spend to accomplish our goals. If it accomplishes our goals, that's free too.
And, I'd definitely be all in favor of the authority to create a project like that or a proposal like that. The biggest thing would be, if it is outside of that committed funds, that they would have to come to council for that. I mean, outside of that committed funds, that has to come to council. But we couldn't just give them the authorization to spend outside of that to lease those buildings. But again, the idea of creating a project or a plan that allows for people to apply for this kind of thing, I'd be for that, for them having that autonomy to do that. But again, there has to be some checks on the.
Oh yeah, I mean you can't let it run rogue, but by the same token, you give it the freedom to think and dream big, you know?
That's where I think the authority to make those plans and come up with a project, and again, bring that project to the council for proposal. Again, if it's a project going outside of the committed funds, or again, the obligation the town's already made. Again, I think that's something that I don't see anybody.
One of the other, we talk about breadth and scope of the program. One of the things that Mayor Pro Tem McCarron has mentioned a number of times is that, that the Main Street manager needs to really be a salesman. And what I actually wrote here was allow the Main Street manager to act as an intermediary to put potential businesses in touch with landlords with the intent of making the highest, best use of each storefront. Kind of a complicated way of saying he needs to be a salesman and get the right businesses here. So it seems like we're pretty much on that, pretty much on that point right there. So, the other thing is working with the landlords in the same way to not just take the first check that comes in to rent to whoever. Right now we have a couple of storefronts in town that are essentially might as well be vacant, even though they're actually occupied and paying rent, but there's nothing actually going on there. So how do we get out of that pattern and into where those storefronts are productive businesses that contribute to like Mayor Pro Tem McCarron said, we want to be careful about stepping on property rights, but by the same
That's what I was
token,
about to
there's,
say, is you have to be careful there.
right,
because-
but it's like zoning laws, at some point, what's best for the community as a whole, sometimes we'll step on.
Before we move too much farther along, we talked a little bit about maintaining an inventory of the downtown spaces, and we were going to talk a little bit about through the Department of Housing and Community Development, they're asking Main Streets to work through this tracker application that's basically an inventory of all the buildings within the Main Street district, and they have offered some intern support for communities to be able to do all the data entry for it. So I had a meeting with DHCD this morning to try to kind of line up a little bit of that help and also help us get started on the effort because I don't know where the former economic development director left off on that. So again, working through getting another password and things set up with DHCD. I think we're up to like 6 now, but that actually went rather well. But we have done one of those efforts Mayor Pro Tem McCarron mentioned that was coupled with our downtown revitalization ordinance that was, that sunset after so many years. We did bring in a commercial realty firm, and they provided an inventory of the buildings within that revitalization district. It was a little bit smaller district, but certainly we can leverage that. And, this idea of inventorying the spaces available, is going to be an ongoing effort for the next couple months. And that is something that the former economic development director, you'll recall in his monthly report, he would list available commercial spaces, throughout the city. So, and that actually is something that's specifically called out in the job description. So, that is certainly part of the plan going forward, is to maintain that inventory. And, if the Main Street manager knows what's available, he or she's gonna know the square footage, what the building looks like, what condition it's in, and maybe be able to match that up with a prospective, new business owner or entrepreneur. So that certainly is part of the plan.
I feel like we're kind of like spinning, we're not really accomplishing anything here. We're spinning wheels, we're not really getting anything done.
And that's what I was saying earlier as far as.
And like, we all know that like the mission is that we want to see the downtown revitalized. We want to see it preserved. We want to see, the businesses doing well. Those are all the things we want to see. Like, I would hope that everyone at this table wants that. I would hope that every citizen of this town wants that. the bottom line is that this starts with money. It starts with money. We can't change the facade of downtown without money. We can't make people want to come here without money. We can't put benches out front and trees and do all the things that would want someone to come here without money. We can't decide how many people we want on the Main Street Board or how many we want on the Main Street Board or who they're gonna be until we decide what money we're gonna put towards this project. I really just feel like we're like spinning.
And that's why I brought it up, because the money is the commitment to the project. I mean, you're really not committed to the project until you've put money towards it. I mean,
And honestly, like with the demographic of this town changing and people being younger, like I know it's frustrating for me. I have a young family, as many of them do. My kids play sports. It's very frustrating that in this downtown, the businesses are never open in the evening or when people are out and about. Like I look at somewhere like Westminster and the restaurants are open and the stores are open and the availability is there. So without money to make the facade better and preserve it, and those business owners wanting to be open because people are now coming, we're just gonna sit here and spin. So I think like we have to make the commitment to put some money forth so that the business owners feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Because without that, we can't accomplish anything else
you can't
here
create the
tonight.
vision, you can't create the mission.
No.
If you don't know the money that you're operating. Again, we can come up with a bunch of grand ideas. I said that a little bit ago, but I really believe council needs to decide what they want to commit, how they want to commit it. Again, it could be a number amount. My recommendation is a percentage amount. That way it grows as the town grows and we don't have to continuously readdress it. And again, it's more, I believe it's more stable overall. It does grow and it does, again, if the town's not doing well, it also does come down.
I also have a follow-up question. Do we have any applications for this open position?
No.
That's a whole nother issue.
It is because if,
Our approach to hiring a downtown manager or an economic development director needs to be looked at. Putting an ad in a newspaper or a magazine or a trade publication
We advertising with
is
them now right now?
not going to do it. It's going to require somebody going out to an existing Main Street community that has a history of success and maybe a staff of 3 running the Main Street program and talking to the number 2 person and saying, how about coming to Taneytown? You could do this all yourself. It's gonna require one-on-one communication with people who are in the business. We can't afford to hire somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. We've got to hire somebody that can hit the ground running. They use a cliche. But in order to do that, you know, if you're mildly, just think about it. If you're mildly satisfied with the job that where you are right now, you like EDC work, but you're the second or third man or lady on the team, and you wonder, well, am I ever going to get a chance to do this myself? The person coming to you and say, hey, look at this opportunity in Taneytown to build your resume, to do what you need, what we know you can do. How about come and talking to us? You know, it's going to take that one-on-one contact to get the right person.
So I don't think I'm going to be honest with council, I don't think it's the commitment, I don't think it's that. I think what you're looking at is if you really want to entice somebody to come here, you know, we put a dollar salary figure out there, you're going to want to up it if you want to entice somebody to come. Nobody's coming for $40,000 to $50,000. I'm going to be honest with you. You're not going to get that quality. You're not going to get a second EDC person who's probably making 60, 70 at one of the other municipalities to come here for 50, even if they're going to run the EDC program.
You get what you pay for.
You do. You get what you pay for.
So you.
If council
you
gives
have-
us the
you have to
authorization, we'll up it.
You have to decide that going in, you know, for the right individual, for somebody that has experience, somebody has a success record, you can afford to pay them.
That's something we want to take up right now.
We could take it up right now. Again, that I will say, I will tell you the biggest problem with why we don't have applications is definitely the salary range. You're talking 40 at the end, 50 at the max, 50 to 60. See if that draws anybody else in. But I'm going to tell you, if you're looking to get, as Mayor Pro Tem saying, a second or EDC slot from another town, they're not coming for less than they're making at that other town. I mean, that's the simple fact of it. So if council's willing to entertain it, we're willing to do it. That's a decision. Again, that comes down to that monetary commitment that council is willing to make to this program and the EDC role. Because council is,
I think that's going to require a little bit of research before we can kind of set a number. Do you want to set
Make
a,
that decision just off the cuff.
yeah, do we want to set a top number that you'd be willing to go to?
I don't even think you
you
need
guys
to
can
do
set a
that.
top number.
You need to pay the person what he's worth, or she's.
Well, that's
Well,
why
yeah.
we have the range.
Yeah,
but
but,
the range is rather limited right now.
Do we know what the range of other EDC salaries is in towns around us?
That's something we should establish.
No, we don't have that.
Okay, so we also probably should have known that before we posted the job, I would think.
Well,
We based it on the last position.
well, the job,
But
right,
we can't base it on the last position because now it's 2025. When was that last position? Like, when was he hired?
21, 22?
Right,
You
so
know, have we used the social media that's involved? Have we used
that's another
LinkedIn
question.
or Alignable or something like that?
Where are we advertising this position?
so it's been put out on social media, it's on the MML website and the city website. You may recall Mayor Miller indicated that he was seeking a more local individual, somebody that was familiar with the city and the, the existing downtown and everything. So the idea was to, focus on the local area. I think the MML classifieds are a very good resource because that's where
And that's where they're
that
looking.
number two, economic development director from some other municipality might be looking, hoping to advance to be, a department head or a Main Street manager. That's where we get those, are, I think, more likely to get those lateral kind of moves, from one town to another. So, I think that's a very good resource for us. But it hasn't been advertised in any,
Like
with Maryland
Indeed or-
Economic Development or, IEDC or any larger organizations, because we were, again, following that initial recommendation or target was to find somebody more local.
Places like LinkedIn or Alignable or one of those internet things. LinkedIn, their primary job is recruitment. And, I can speak from personal experience. I'll get 4 emails a month from people from LinkedIn wanting me to be their loan officer. Doing that, but I mean, they kind of worry you to death, quite frankly. So if we have that kind of, if we could, and that would be something to check out. I mean, I don't think it's very costly. And, but, if we say, can you help us do this? They have a huge staff dedicated to recruitment. They know where these people are and it's a two-way street. People that subscribe to LinkedIn say, I'm looking to make a move. What do you have? Who's out there is hiring? It's a great tool. It truly is.
I personally think that we're being too frugal.
We're being
I-
what?
Too frugal.
I mean, if I was,
But-
my recommendation to council is up the upper limit. Again, the salary is going to be based on the qualifications of the individual regardless.
Right.
If you guys really want to start getting some people applying, you're going to have to up the upper limit. I mean, we can spend a couple more weeks, go out, get some quotes on the other EDC roles, but I'm going to tell you, one of the requests is that this role got filled fast. And
Key element to all of this.
putting this out the way, it's not going to be fast. The fastest time since I've been here, and again, the previous filled appointed positions, the fastest it's been filled is 6 months. I'm going to be honest to everybody out there, it's the fastest time it has been filled in the recent appointments is 6 months. Some of those positions have taken 2 years to fill. So we really need to think for a second on whether, again, maybe we up that upper limit, maybe we see if we can come in, but council needs to make a little bit more decisive action.
Yeah, what's the current upper limit on the,
So the advertisement was 43,448 to 50,369.
I mean, that sounds like a good starting point to me
Yeah,
for the upper limit.
that's almost,
I mean, I'll be honest,
let's make a deal.
like I
But
said,
no,
it's a good starting point.
I'm seeing, you know,
Again, you need to recruit, I don't even know that I'd mention salary.
well, you gotta,
have to.
yeah, you gotta, yeah,
Nobody
in
is
this day and
applying,
age.
When,
Salary commensurate upon experience. Right individual, you can pay him what he needs or her needs.
people want to know what they're going to make or what they could
Yeah,
possibly make. I mean, again, we could, I'm willing to try whatever council wants tried, but you guys got to remember, every time this gets changed, every time we're
If you
indecisive
set
in
a
the
higher
actual
limit,
action, this
then
is
that's what you're
taking,
gonna pay him.
Well, that's
this is going to take longer and longer. So-
75?
so just
I'm trying to move this.
thinking as the one who needs to manage all the department heads in the city.
Yes.
And try to maintain a decent morale
Yes.
in the city. We see what happens when one department gets stuff that other departments don't get. We have talked about doing, a compensation study to see where we rank, compared to our local market, which is, includes Frederick County and Adams County and York County. And we never pulled the trigger to do that. But then when we have a specific position that's open, it's like, well, are we competitive? Well, we don't know because we never do a study. And we typically don't have apples to apples comparisons to make with our neighbors. We have different blending of responsibilities than other municipalities our size. So it's very hard for the existing staff to do this kind of a study. Now, here we may have, and this is a perfect example. When Mr. Mishi and I reached out to a bunch of other Main Street communities, we found all kinds of different models that they were operating under. Even though the state says, 35-hour minimum, for communities over 5,000 people, most of the communities that were, between 5 and 10,000 people didn't follow that model.
And you're going to find all
And-
different price
and-
points because the question comes, how much you want to
And
commit
most
to
were
it.
also split with some other function within EDC.
So the average
So-
in Maryland is 81,000 to 124,000. We are nowhere near.
Do you want to see what a public,
Not Montgomery County.
right,
And we're not.
I understand that, but like,
can't
what's
compare
Westminster paying theirs? Like, we
Right.
have to be competitive, or else no one's gonna wanna come here, and then we're gonna be back here spinning our wheels.
But we're not Westminster, and we're
Oh,
not
it's gonna-
Frederick, and we're not Leesburg.
You can't pay what you
We're
don't
nowhere near
have.
Westminster. You know why? Because we don't have someone to make us that.
Well, we're also
We're not
a
gonna
third
be.
the
They
size.
don't
We
wanna
don't
be.
have
So, council-
25,000.
I'm not saying that we want to be
Council, calm
Westminster.
calm
but
down for a second.
We can't pay someone 30 to 40 grand
No.
and expect them to change our Main Street. That's
Again,
not realistic. And if
this
that's what
is-
we want, then I'm not sure why we're even
What,
sitting here.
what
It's
it
not gonna
comes, what it
change.
comes down to is, what does council want to commit to this program? We can find money. Again, it just depends on what are the commitments and what are the priorities for council when it comes to the budget. Because we can find the money and we can take it from other places, but the question comes down to is, what do you want to commit to this particular role? What do you want to commit to this particular program? We can make the budget work, but again, it's going to come down to
well,
priorities.
this
and
is a
budget
little bit
priorities.
contrary to our budget discussions
I know.
where, you gave
Trust
me
me,
some
I know.
direction for the department heads, and this is
I-
kind of
I
going
believe-
contrary to that.
I believe we need to start saving up, because it's about to be a
One-
bumpy ride for municipalities.
One point I want to make, I'm willing to commit to whatever salary it takes to get the person that we need. And you say, well, what about the so-and-so department head? They're not making that much money. I'll tell you a story that goes back a long time ago when I was a young retail store manager. managing a store for Southern States. I had a brand-new store, just built it. We had a lawn and garden and farm store, and we also had a automotive center, tire battery and accessories, tires and oil changes and stuff. And it was a devil of a time hiring somebody to manage that tire center. My boss at the time came to me and said, well, I think we've got somebody to manage the tire center, and it's going to cost X to do that. I said, what are you talking about? That's almost as much as I'm making. You want to apply for that job? That ended my conversation. We hired the guy. He did our good job. And that's the same attitude we need to take here. Somebody comes to you and say, well, how come you're paying that economic director so much? You want to apply for that job?
Also, I feel like if we want to not be where we are right now, we have to do it. Here's where we are. We don't like where we are, right? So we have to do something about it. We have to be willing to do something about it.
Jim, or my recommendation to council would be the upper limit of 70 for now.
Okay.
See what the applications come in at.
Consensus on that?
Start a consensus starting with Councilmember Tillman.
I'm good.
Again, we'll plan the budget accordingly. The budget's coming up anyways, so.
I mean, I think it's fine to put the limit at that, and again, we need to look at their.
And Jim, if we're not having anything by the end of the month, council should expect a special meeting at the end of March. So just be prepared for that, because that'll be the next thing. We're not going to keep wasting time on this. We'll schedule meetings as needed. Foster, I'll just continue I know we already have consensus, but. Councilmember Fuller.
I'm not prepared to put a number on the upper limit.
I don't like it without the research. I don't like it without
Again,
I feel like we're trying to spend money we don't have.
I think we need to find the individual that's right for the job, and then talk about the money.
How about if we just say, leave it more open-ended and revise the job posting, salary commensurate with experience, something like that?
That's what I like.
And
I
just-
haven't
just
seen it in
leave
a
it.
while, but it's okay to do
Any
that.
executive position, any position of responsibility always has that phrase tacked at the end of it.
Here's what I'm going to tell you guys, is we have our meetings are public.
Yeah.
If that's what council wants to do, I can only advise so much. I highly recommend they set that number higher. If you want to do commensurate on experience, that's fine. I urge
if you're
council to consider that we have public meetings, and I'd imagine anybody who's applying for a city job, I would hope they go back and look at some of our meetings, but
Based on past history, I'd have a hard time supporting anybody that didn't have direct experience with this
okay.
No sense being here 5 years into the future and then having the
So,
same discussion.
Just so we can get on to the next subject, I'm going to go for consensus on, again, based on experience with no actual monetary number posted. Councilmember Fuller. Councilmember Foster. McCarron, that's consensus. Jim?
Revise the wording,
Revise
leave
the
it
wording.
open-ended.
Yeah, leave it open.
Well, so the next thing that was on my agenda to talk about is actually the first thing on the staff report recommendations to go over, and that's the operating ordinance, and talk about what that form should be and how in-depth that should be. The question, do we need one? If we believe we really should have one, what does it look like?
One second, my recommendation is really that council needs to think of the monetary value they are gonna put on this Main Street Committee, once again, because you also, you guys really need to set a value of what you are going to commit to this committee. Even if we're looking for the EDC role, if one of the primary purposes is 95% of it spent on Main Street, I would really hope we can discuss with this, whoever's applying for the EDC role, what they're gonna be working with that committee as far as this revitalization goes. Because when we go to interview these people, it's gonna be us talking about, hey, council really wants to revitalize Main Street. What are you working with to revitalize it? I would please like council to commit to something on it. Again, you can keep it as is, that's fine, we'll budget for it. You can set it to a percentage, that's fine too, we'll budget for it. Just please think about.
Well, I think everybody, I mean, the current level of funding is only $12,000.
Yeah.
So, recognizing the third formula, and that we may be a bit of time ramping up to that formula because we're starting essentially from scratch with no fundraising and with no outside donations and without, really without any kind of grant funding other than the $25,000 that the state promises to kick in. What does that number look like? It's not 12. Is it 25? Is it 30? Is it 50? That all y'all.
Do we want to use fund balance to balance our operating budget this year? Do we want to dip into savings to
We're not
have a
gonna,
balanced budget?
we're not gonna need to.
I mean, not
No,
between now and.
I'm
I
trying
know.
to set some
We're not-
parameters.
We're
We don't
not-
know that.
we're not gonna
How
need
would we
to,
know
though.
that?
That's a stern, hard line there. We need money going into the fund balance.
So,
And again, I'm
But-
going to tell you, Councilmember Fuller, I don't disagree with you, but I think the question comes down to priorities. And again, this next budget is going to come down, if council wants to prioritize Main Street, wants to prioritize funding to Main Street, and wants to prioritize the EDC role, we will make that happen in the budget. I'm perfectly fine. But other stuff is going to come down. It will be a
Exactly.
balanced budget.
That's why I'm asking, because, we've been asked to keep things lean, and, I have to sit down and work with Public Works and the Police Department at this point on the budget. I haven't really reviewed their budgets. They're the two largest departmental budgets for us here at the city. The mayor has asked us to try to rein things into like essential only as far as any discretionary line items we have. So,
I don't want anybody confused out there. It is going to be a tough time for municipalities. As the federal government constricts, as the state government constricts, and as the county government constricts, we need to start thinking of having extra money set aside, especially if we're looking to do capital projects here in the city, which is fixing your roads, fixing your infrastructure, and everything in between. We have to start planning for that. And that's why, again, I just want to explain, that's why I've directed that.
Right.
Is that we need to make sure that we have reined this in a little bit to where we are putting money away. But again, I'm willing to accomplish, because again, ultimately, council approves this budget. If that is what council is looking for, we will do that. But again, we will make sure it is a balanced budget regardless.
right,
So
but I
just
bring
remember
that up, I bring that up to keep,
This ask is
to
not
bring
big.
council in the loop on the
Yep.
current
Yep.
budget efforts, so.
I mean, this is
And
not.
again, I appreciate that.
I mean, this isn't a big ask. We're not asking for
It
hundreds of
isn't.
thousands
I'm
of
gonna tell you,
dollars.
realistically, I don't think
We're
it
in
is
the
a big
tens of
ask.
thousands here.
Yeah, again, I don't think it is a big ask. You just gotta remember, it is gonna come from somewhere. That's the only thing you have to remember. Any money you allocate to EDC, any money you allocate to Main Street, it will become from somewhere else. But again, if that is the priority this council wants to make, we'll oblige. I mean, I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that, because and again, that's to Councilmember Fuller's point and Councilmember Foster's point is, we don't have this money already allocated for all this. It has to come from somewhere, and the budget will be balanced. I mean, we're not drawing from fund balance. especially with everything that's coming up. We got a lot of projects in the works. We got a lot of roads that need fixed. We're going to make sure we're fulfilling those goals. So again, council just really needs to think on that, and that's why I've been talking about the money and the commitment, is because that is a priority. That is a priority you are making with the budget. And again, I'm not going to present you a budget that doesn't meet that priority. And if you make it a priority, we will do it as such.
One of the issues that, came out of all of the things that went on last year around the Main Street Committee was we really didn't have a handle on what they were spending. What were the committed expenditures, so when we talk about, $12,000 is a fairly small amount, but, I think it's pretty clear we're gonna need to be spending more than that, and the question is, what are we gonna be spending it on? And, what were we committed to?
And again, just to be clear, it isn't just 12,000. Remember, if you up that
Right.
EDC pay, that is money that it's 95%
Well,
maintenance. You know what I mean?
And, right, and that's the other side of that, is that part of
Make sure
the,
to take that.
part of the
It's all from the
commitment
same.
from the city is that comes out of that same, yeah, I agree, it comes out of the same budget. But I guess it's the question that, what are the basic operating needs of the committee, and what are the, what's that funding need look like? Do we have an idea about what, we talked about the Taneytown record. You remember how much that, I know at some point we tossed around figures.
I can go back and try to dig some of those out, but I think it's been so long since we've had a Main Street board pass a budget. It's probably been since
yeah.
2017, 2018, because
all right, well,
the
so-
program had kind of fizzled before COVID hit, and that was just the final nail in the coffin.
But I know that, for example, there's an ad right here in the Emmitsburg News Journal that we placed. Was that a Main Street placed ad? If it is, what was that spent? So if we have an idea of what those expenses are, and that kind of gives us an idea.
And just to be clear, that was a prior commitment.
And I think that, yes, and I think we're getting into another one of those chicken or egg sort of discussions, because, I was suggesting that the committees develop their goals for the year, their work plan for the year, that be incorporated into an overall work plan for Main Street, and that be incorporated into their budget for the year. But we got tangled up in a lot of questions about having to know what, had happened in previous years, and, leaning on the historic information rather than, looking at things as a fresh start. So,
I think
if we
gotta
want to
be-
do what the board did under Nancy 6 years ago, we may be able to dig that up. But, most of our financial records are purged after 3 years.
Right.
So,
We can't really measure what we're gonna
But-
do in the future by what we did in the past. We look at the last 5 years or 6 years or however long it's been, and just realize that we made a lot of mistakes.
well,
We just can't make them again, that's all.
when we started the program, we grew it little by little. We started it, we didn't have a previous board to look at. I was on the first Main Street board. I was on the Downtown Revitalization Committee that was the catalyst for us to become a Main Street, and I was on the Main Street board and became the chair before I became a full-time employee. We didn't have a budget to look back at what somebody else had done. We sat down, we said, okay, what can we do? What are our limits? What do we think we can spend? And, after the first year or two, we did fundraisers. Certainly the city contributed the Main Street manager's time, as in-kind service. And yes, the Main Street manager was the one that did the grant applications for the board. But we developed, our goals and objectives, looked at what they would cost, figured out what we thought we could afford, and that became our budget for the year, and that's what we operated under. And a city contribution to that budget was, initially a big part of it, sure. But, I mean, we did it once, and if we're starting a brand-new board, maybe we need to start small and grow it as the board, develops and gels. And, I'm a little bit concerned that, we're talking through all these big picture things, and I think it's the city's role to set the guardrails and let something get started. Develop appoint a new board, give them a framework to work within, and let them come up with their plan, let them come up with their goals and objectives. I think that if we keep doing what we're doing, kind of following what Beth said, although I'm maybe more of a proponent for starting small and growing little by little, but, our conversations aren't really getting us that much closer to the end line,
It
I
isn't.
think.
All right.
So here's what I would suggest as it approaches the 9 o'clock hour here, and I said we want to try to keep this to an hour and a half tonight. So, and we'd like to have an opportunity for anyone from the gallery to speak. What I would recommend is that as we set the meeting time for the date and time for the next meeting, that we all review the staff report that came out back in December, and be ready for the next meeting to start working through those recommendations. The other thing that I would ask is if we have an idea of what was spent on the advertising that's been done in the last year, that we bring that number with us so that we can discuss, maybe is that the starting point for going forward. And let's have an idea of what we're talking about. In the meantime, we'll make the adjustment to the job posting that we just talked about, and because we'll have to consider that in with whatever we consider in terms of an increase in funding, based on you trying to stay with your zero sum. That sound like a plan to everyone?
Just to be clear, that does mean our Main Street commitment will stay at the 12 then?
Yeah,
For the budget coming up.
In the budget coming up, I'm sure it'll be more than 12. But
Just so you're aware, it is March.
I understand, and we need to get it out. So let's try to have this ready for the next time we meet, and let's set the next time.
Looking for a motion of adjournment.
Public
I-
speaking.
Oh, sorry. I apologize, y'all. Brain's a little foggy. I've been in Capitol Hill all day. Public, we'll start with public comment. Whoever wants to come up first.
Oh. And I'll just remind everybody, please get reasonably close to the microphone, please, and talk into the mic.
Thank you for all the discussions among you. There were some really good topics. I hear things from different individuals that I really like as a merchant in the Main Street district. So I say this amusingly. Economic Development Director may not necessarily be a he. Might be a she.
It's one or the other.
In fact, we had a very successful she in the past. As it relates to the three key questions, I want to respond to say all of the above. Every point in here is strategic in the way we should think of how Main Street should be formed. Nothing should be left related to Jim McCarron's comments that he shared with us. I wanted to mention that America organization and website that is loaded with resources that the public, anyone can access. They give you great ideas how to solve all of these types of issues. So I want to point it out that that is a tremendous resource that I don't think anybody's really accessed. By the way, the county has resources for startup and expansion type businesses. I don't think that's something that the city of Taneytown would necessarily invest in. I think that's leave that to the county and their economic development resources. I'm going to jump around a little bit. You know, when you think about expenses for Main Street, there's expenses and then there's capital. There is a big difference, and it's treated very differently for the bean counters in the room. And it's too early to be a bean counter when it comes to economic development, in my opinion. You know, those things will all come about, sort of as Jim has expressed, but you can't necessarily nail it down until you're at the budget table for the new year. Economic development salary. So let's say you're going to make the top range $75K, just as an example. So typically, for the best qualified individuals that you would hire, you probably bring them in about $69K. That way, over 3 years, they're reaching the top of the salary. That's the way it works in corporate America. So that's kind of the logic that you might want to approach. Get blown away by a candidate, they could earn 80 or 90, certainly worth considering. I am worried about the thought that an economic development director that was hired would spend about 35 hours a week on Main Street. That would only leave 15 hours of a normal 40-hour week for economic development.
5 hours.
5 hours. So there's something wrong there. We need at least 60 hours in this town to handle economic development and Main Street.
Longer work weeks, that's all.
So you work them to death, like someone we know in the public eye. I want to get through these quickly because I know everybody wants to go home. The only comment that I want to focus on in all of the points is on the third question. Define membership requirements for any of the Main Street board, and in particular, the board president. I want to suggest that any advisory board include a secretary, or one of those roles would be the secretary to keep track of the minutes and the meeting notes. Because if you had followed all the Main Street Advisory Board meetings of the past, a lot of the things that were recommended, that were done, were never followed up or compiled, which is really a crime to the Main Street folks and the people that put a lot of effort in what they did. There were proposed budgets put together for each of the 5 advisory board chairmen. There were also comments and recommendations for the rules and regulations. They were just thrown out the door. There are people, not only in this room, that are going to be paying attention to this meeting, that put a lot of time into what they were intending to do and were passionate about their efforts. And it's really a disservice to the Main Street entity, if you want to call it that, that what happened, happened. I mean, now it's, not much we can do. But I know that there are those resources still available to us that can easily be put back together as Main Street moves forward. I don't want, even though you'll have a new advisory board, there's still a lot that's good that was produced before. And I'm not being as articulate as I would like to be on this, but I'm just throwing this out because there was so much covered tonight. By the way, the city of Frederick has ordinances in place to deal with all the issues of buildings that need to be renovated, condemned, if that be the case. They have handled that and they know what they're doing. They're not always successful. But I do believe that that's a direction we need to go efforts to purchase properties in the past that got poo-pooed for one reason or another. But fortunately, that might be the direction that we have to go to accomplish the goals.
Thank you, Paul.
So long.
Thank you, Paul.
But thank you for your time, and please, this is so important for this city. We're not in the minor leagues anymore. We're getting to the major leagues. Sometimes the salaries are a little higher, the budgets have to be a little higher, but just think about if this one aspect of the city could come together with all the other good things that are going on in our town, what it could really mean. I know that the residents all over the town, the stakeholders, the businesses, some of them are afraid to be here. They don't want to get entangled in all the controversy that happens on city council. They don't trust the city. There's a lot of mistrust with city officials these days. There's such a tremendous opportunity to turn that around. I'd like to see the city council and the mayor find a way to blow this out of the water and to really make it happen and be an example for the rest of
We're trying, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
the county. Thank you.
Next person up for public comment.
Appreciate everyone talking about Main Street. I just want to touch base on one important thing when you guys are talking about ordinance. Q4 of last year, Governor Wes Moore passed a transparency law on wage range that you have to be compliant per Maryland. Of course, still refer to you guys as lawyers, but you might want to make sure we're in compliant. If we do take this job down and repost it, you might want to double check the laws for Maryland on job posting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next person up for public comment.
Good evening. Thank you for holding this meeting. My name is Sharon Tillman. I'm a business owner and a resident of the downtown Main Street community. Main Street, by definition, is a grassroots program. It is a community-driven program. My advice to you is to work the program. Thousands of communities make this program work. Follow the program as it is designated and designed instead of trying to reinvent it. The mission of Main Street is already set by the program. What we need to do collectively is set the vision. What is the vision for our Taneytown Main Street? This comes from the stakeholders to develop that mission in concert with the community. This is the businesses, the residents, the investors. It will take a critical mass to reach the state that we want to be in, to reach that time when we can have uniform businesses opening at the same times in the same place. This is going to take a lot of time, but we need to start somewhere or we will never go anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person up for public comment?
Scott Davis, my mom and I own Rust. The common thread, obviously, quick and short, the salary range is posted needs to go way up. As a business owner who's built 2 successful software companies and owns a business on Main Street, if you need to make an investment in something, you need to make the investment. If you have a problem, you got to fix it, and that costs money. The same thing goes for the marketing problem. The same thing goes for the budget of Main Street. Starting with a small budget and working your way forward isn't going to get you anywhere, because to get the positive momentum and change you need, you're going to have to fund it. And that goes especially as we go into a potential financial downturn. I mean, the market could be pricing a recession in a couple weeks. And so to come up on the other side of that, we have to make an investment early through it to come out on top of it in the end. So as somebody who's done this from a revenue generating business perspective that's sold businesses for multi-millions of dollars, invest into the downtown to be what you want and not sit and wait and see. That's just my input as somebody who's done this.
Thank you, appreciate it. Next person up for public comment? It does, yeah.
Good discussion. As a new resident, or I guess 2.5 years ago we moved here, it's exciting to hear all the discussion about Main Street and the ideas to have it reach its potential. So that's very exciting. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, but the fact that we're having these conversations is great. I would say from the outside looking in, there was some earlier talk at the beginning of the meeting about what businesses do we want. I think a lot of people here agree that it starts with food and drink. We have a lot of cool boutiques and antique shops downtown, but it starts with food and drink that's available, like was mentioned earlier, after hours when people are home from work or on the weekends. So if not at this meeting, but in the future, if there could be some creative ideas for enticing businesses to come here and open some food and drink options, I think that's very impactful. It has an impact outside of its weight. So focusing on food and drink downtown would be, I think, where it all starts. And a lot of people around town agree that that's where it all starts if Main Street's going to get revitalized. It was mentioned that the economic development person was initially sought for locally, but I would encourage that that person is going to have a huge role in where Main Street goes, to look outside of maybe the county or however that wide that net was. Maybe reaching out to University of Maryland area. The person that it sounds like we're looking for as the economic development person, it sounds like that's going to be a 4-year degree person, someone who has, like, as Mayor Pro Tem said, someone who has experience with this. And with that in mind, anyone who has experience in this is going to ask or be looking for, they won't open that job posting up if that salary is, I think, where it currently is. So that thought, I think, is a good one. Getting creative, of course, budget gets sticky, but like the gentleman said earlier, if there was some sort of salary ramp built in for that economic development person, maybe that's a creative way to tackle that issue there. Start someone 55, 60, and then, with some incentives after 2 years, they know what they'll build up to. So maybe that's a middle of the road idea for how to work around that, that salary issue that was discussed so much here, a salary ramp. And then one other thing that I've noticed since living here is standardized signage. And I don't think that that would be a very deep investment money-wise, but when I go to other towns that have these main streets that are kind of built out and freshened and revitalized, they all seem to have some sort of nice signage that could be on the main street or on the edges of town that let people know what's going on Main Street or new businesses. I know we have electronic sign over by Memorial Park where a good amount of traffic comes in, but I think most people here would agree that there's a lot more traffic that goes past the circle out the 140 East Way. So with the mindset of working with what we have, or at least maybe with the budget that we have, some sort of signage out on the east side of town that would let people know of an open business or a business that's coming to Taneytown, that could be good. Or some thing about signage downtown. There are businesses open here. It's difficult to see what they are when you're a commuter driving past. So thinking about signage and working with what we already have to boost the businesses that are here already is, I think, a thought worth thinking about. And then again, like you said, or a lot of people said, the person who's going to be this economic development person kind of needs to be a salesman. It is going to be a tough job. Another reason I think casting a wider net for an applicant who's not local is they'll come in with a fresh perspective. There won't be as many ties. Oh, that's my buddy, I can't do this, or that's my buddy, I can't step on their toes. It'll be someone who just comes in and gets the job done. But also when you think about the signage idea, perhaps, you know, if you're going out telling people or telling business owners around the area that we want you to come to Taneytown, we'd like you to open up here. If you have that sort of signage or ideas about that to help support them, that will make it more inviting to them. And they say, oh yeah, well sweet, you can advertise that we're coming in these certain ways. So getting the word out, I think is going to be a big component. Communicating to the public is a big component of this Main Street effort. So just my thoughts, and thank you all for the conversation.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Could you tell me your name, please?
Yeah, Mitchell Masser.
Much.
Any additional public comments?
Hello, been watching the stream from home as much as I could. The audio's been cutting out pretty bad. Basically for anybody who doesn't project. Couple things that seem like they've come up tonight. It seemed like we were trying to come up with a budget number before we actually had a goal of what this committee or group is supposed to be doing. So you can't really start throwing money at something until you know where you're actually going. So that would kind of be my input would be, we need to have more of a goal as to what this Main Street committee is actually going to be doing. And it seems like it's been all over the map from everybody as to what the ideas will be for that particular committee. Kind of needs to get narrowed down a little bit, I would think, before you can put money up. Secondly, do we have buy-in from the existing Main Street businesses? I haven't seen a lot of effort by the Main Street businesses to actually engage with the community. I've never received an advertisement at my house or seen anything for the Main Street businesses. Okay, I had to go and walk Main Street just to see what was there, and most of it wasn't open. So basically, that's where I'm headed, is do we have the buy-in from the Main Street businesses? Because they don't seem to be pushing themselves. I mean, of course, you get like no anchovies because they're open at night and they're trying to serve people. But you don't really get much of anything else. I went into, I might mess up the name, Stonehouse, and got some things from it. That was very nice. I hadn't heard of them in 3 years other than driving past and seeing the painted windows. So yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at, is do we have buy-in from the existing Main Street businesses before we're trying to bring in new Main Street businesses? And what would be used to entice new Main Street businesses when we don't have Main Street businesses that are currently drawing from the community? So, that's.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. Do we have any additional public comment? Hearing none, I have one more thing I got to read, which is the City of Taneytown Record of Closed Meeting. I forgot to read it at the beginning of this meeting. On the date of March 10th, 2025 at 8:05 p.m. at the place of City Hall, a motion to hold a closed meeting was made by Councilmember Foster with a second by Councilmember Fuller. In accordance to the Maryland Open Meetings Act, Title 10, Governmental Procedures, Subtitle 5, Meetings Section 3-305B, this meeting was closed in order to discuss, to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice. The topics discussed were framework requirements and approval process for developmental rights responsibilities agreement and the relationship between State Highway Administration and the city. The persons present at the closed session were Mayor Miller and all of the council members, with Mayor Miller and Councilmember Cheney attending virtually. City manager was there, and the attorney was there, and the clerk was there. Does that satisfy the requirement? Sounds good. Thank you. No actions were taken, and a motion of adjournment was made at 9:20 p.m. by Councilmember Tillman with a second by Cheney. I'm looking for a motion of adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
Looking for a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Seriously, appreciate it.